You know that thing where you ask why about something totally ordinary, and then 40 minutes later you're deep in a research rabbit hole about the evolutionary origins of embarrassment? Yeah, most people clock out of that loop pretty fast, but some brains just don't. If that sounds familiar, this one's for you. And here's what's interesting. That's not a design flaw. That's actually one of several patterns that keep showing up in psychology research on high intelligence, not the dramatic movie genius kind, the quieter, weirder, everyday kind. Today we're looking at 5 of them, and chances are you already do most of these without even knowing it. We tend to picture high IQ as something that looks obvious, the person who's always the smartest in the room. Quick with answers, never uncertain, probably wearing a turtleneck. But cognitive psychologists tell a different story. They say intelligence shows up less in how you perform and more in how your brain processes the world between the big moments. And those processing habits, they're often the ones that look the most unremarkable, or honestly a little strange. Everyday habits that quietly signal something interesting is happening upstairs. You might already recognize a few, and if you do, stick around because there's a reframe coming that might actually be useful. And if you also happen to be an introvert, we did a whole separate video on the habits that show up specifically in introverts with a high IQ. I'll link that one for you at the end, because some of this overlaps in the most fascinating ways. The first habit is constant curiosity, and not the polite kind, the relentless, slightly inconvenient kind. People with high IQs tend to ask questions about almost everything, not just the big philosophical ones, the small, ordinary ones too. Why does that system work like that? Why do people always do this specific thing in this specific situation? Why is this word spelled that way? Psychologist Dr. Sophie von Stum, in a large meta-analysis published in Perspectives on Psychological Science, described curiosity as a hunger for exploration. Her research found that curiosity and conscientiousness together had roughly the same effect on performance outcomes as raw intelligence. That's a significant claim. It means curiosity isn't just a nice personality trait, it's doing real cognitive work. The neuroscience backs this up too. Curiosity activates the brain's dopamine reward system. That means wondering, before you even find the answer, is already pleasurable to a curious brain. The search itself is the reward, which explains why some people can't just Google one thing and stop. If this is you, it doesn't mean you're distractible. It means your brain is running on a different fuel source. The second habit looks a lot like indecision, but it isn't. Highly analytical brains tend to overthink small things, not because they're anxious, though that can be part of it, but because they're simultaneously running multiple mental models at once. They're checking this option against that scenario, weighting this variable against that one, tracking what happens 3 steps ahead in each direction. Psychologists describe this through dual process theory. System 1 thinking is fast and intuitive. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and analytical. The thing is, when your System 2 is highly developed, it fires up for things that wouldn't bother other people. Minor decisions, social situations, conversations you had 6 days ago. This is sometimes called analysis paralysis, and yes, it can be frustrating, but it comes from the same cognitive machinery that also handles complex problems very well. Think of it like having a processor that's simply running more threads than the task technically requires. It's not inefficient, it's just running hotter than average. The small comfort, recognizing that your overthinking is structural, not personal, actually makes it easier to interrupt. You're not broken. Your brain just doesn't know when to clock off. If this is landing for you, a subscribe keeps the Microwins Club growing, and it genuinely helps more people find this kind of content. A quick thumbs up does the same. And I'm curious, which of these habits do you clock in yourself? Drop it in the comments. The third habit is one that gets misread constantly. It's the willingness to change your mind. Highly intelligent people tend to treat their beliefs more like working hypotheses than fixed facts. When new information arrives, they update the model. They don't dig in defensively, they adjust. There's a great quote often attributed to economist John Maynard Keynes: "When the facts change, I change my mind." Researchers at Cambridge University have studied this as a marker of cognitive flexibility, and their work published in Cerebral Cortex describes it as the ability to adapt by switching strategies in response to new information. Here's the cultural awkwardness, though. Society tends to reward certainty. Confidence reads as competence. Changing your mind gets labeled as weakness or inconsistency or not knowing what you think. But in psychology, the opposite is closer to true. The inability to update on new evidence is actually linked to poorer problem-solving outcomes, and often to some specific mental health patterns too. The smarter move literally is to hold your opinions loosely, like Gandalf holding his hat in a storm. Loosely, but still wearing it. Updating your beliefs when the evidence changes isn't uncertainty. It's intellectual honesty, and a fairly clear sign that your brain is doing its job. Fourth habit, a strong, sometimes unusual sense of humor. This one is well researched and a little surprising. A study from the Medical University of Vienna found that people who appreciate dark or complex humor score significantly higher on both verbal and nonverbal intelligence tests. A separate study published in the journal Intelligence found a clear link between verbal IQ and humor production ability. Specifically, higher verbal intelligence predicted the ability to generate funnier material, as rated by independent observers. Why? Because humor is cognitively expensive. To land a joke, your brain has to recognize a pattern, break it unexpectedly, connect two unrelated ideas, and time the delivery all in under a second. That's a lot of processing happening very fast. The dry wit types, the ones who say something devastating and then just look at you blankly. That's not social awkwardness. That's a brain that's running pattern matching at impressive speed and choosing the most efficient response. Einstein said he attributed his mind to having a childlike sense of humor. Whether or not that's exactly true, the research broadly agrees. If your humor runs a little weird, a little dark, a little sideways, that's not a personality flaw, it's a cognitive signature. The fifth habit is the quietest one. It's a persistent search for meaning, not in a dramatic philosopher in a cave kind of way, more like a low-level background process that never fully switches off. A quiet question underneath ordinary life. Why do people work the way they do? What actually matters? What's the point of this specific thing? Developmental psychologist Howard Gardner recognized this as a distinct intelligence type. He called it existential intelligence, the capacity to engage with big questions about existence, purpose, and the nature of human experience. He linked it to broader cognitive ability, specifically the capacity for abstraction and metacognition, which is thinking about your own thinking. Research on high IQ individuals consistently finds this trait showing up, not always as philosophy, sometimes just as a recurring quiet restlessness, a sense that surface-level explanations don't quite satisfy, a preference for conversations that go somewhere. And yes, it can be exhausting. Ask someone with existential intelligence about their weekend, and the answer might take a philosophical detour nobody planned for. But that background process is also what drives the thinking that actually goes somewhere. The curiosity that compounds the questions that eventually become insight. It's not overthinking the meaning of life. It's just a brain that keeps asking better questions. 5 habits. Constant curiosity, analytical overprocessing, cognitive flexibility, complex humor, and a quiet search for meaning. None of them look impressive from the outside. All of them are doing something real underneath. If some of these felt familiar, that's not a coincidence. And if you're also someone who identifies as an introvert, there's a companion video on the channel that goes deep on the habits that show up specifically in introverts with high IQ. The overlap is genuinely interesting. I'll link it right here. For now, if you've had a micro win this week, however small, drop it in the comments below. See you again in the next episode of Micro Wins Club. Small steps towards real change.